So, welcome listeners to another series of It's an Ugly Truth, sponsored by Robo Reception. So far, we've had some awesome guests, some welcomed, others not so much, but today our guest has spent his career persuading dentists that there is another way, a fight that has cost him his registration, his career, and almost his health. A fight that's not only cost him his livelihood, but has seen the term mewing become just as well known as the term flossing. We will delve into his life, his struggles. We'll find out if the fight was worth it, whether that fight will go on, whether the fight is over, or in the words of Rocky Balboa, whether he has just one more round. Welcome to another series of It's an Ugly Truth. Welcome, Dr. Mike Mew.
Hello, Grant. Pleasure. Thank you very much for having me here.
Oh, my pleasure. Look, I always like to start with a story. I mean, my story was I was away with the children. We were talking about jaw lines at the dinner table. And isn't it funny how jaw lines have become so important with the younger generation? That's not a debate. That's not debatable. Jaw lines have become important with the younger generation. Now, sometimes kids worry about other things. In my day, it was biceps, lats, it was back, it was chest, but now it's jawline. That was boarding school, but now they seem to be talking about this jaw. They get paranoid about this jaw. I even know a child who had to have therapy because they were worried about their jawline. That wasn't anything you had said. That was a trend that is coming out from school. Now, I knew nothing about this. I was sitting around the dinner table in Tenerife, and one of the kids suddenly started going, "Do you know what? Why don't you start mewing?" And I went, "What? Surely not. Surely not. Surely this can't be the same mewing that the Dr. Mew." So I said that I knew you were the made up, and you were so kind in getting your dad to wish my son a happy birthday on video. I look really cool in front of the kids. And then I started thinking about it. Then I was on my way home in a taxi from Tenerife, and I turned around to the Cuban taxi driver and I went, "Have you heard of mewing?" And he'd heard of mewing. So that was a Cuban taxi driver in Tenerife. And do you know why I tell this story? Because the saying, it only takes one pebble to start an avalanche. So listen, welcome. What's your story, Mike?
Okay, so my story is being born into a very interesting family. You know, whichever way you look at it, because most people know my father, but, well, for whatever reasons they do know my father, there is so much more to him and so much more to the family. You know, my grandmother was burning her ration books outside Parliament at the end of the Second World War. She would have loved to be a suffragette, but she was a bit late. So I was born into this family that questioned everything. And I sort of got hooked on some of the things my father said. I mean, clearly there's many other facets, but within this facet, this has taken over my life, is this quest to get answers. My father's got some ideas. I don't believe everything he says. I argue with him more than anyone else in the world. And I'm just trying to understand what's happening because, we talk about this Hippocratic oath. They say every doctor, I don't remember ever signing this. I don't remember the end of dental school. They go, "Oh, by the way, quick, got to sign the Hippocratic oath before you head out." But I kind of take the ideals of this really seriously. And I'm a little bit, I've found out that I'm on the spectrum. Mainly this came from my sister because her oldest was on the spectrum and she then started to read about it. And the more she read, the more her eyes started to open and she looked around her family and went, "Oh my God. She's seeing me, she's seeing Dad, she's seeing my brother, and of course, even herself." And, she said something to me recently. We went, we were somewhere and I'd forgotten something. And she says, "Mike, your inability to spell and your inability to sort of, organize things, that's dyslexic." She goes, "The rest, that's autistic."
Oh, really?
And that really just, when someone says something, it just really goes through your mind round and round and round. And, it's really weird. I'm surprised with other people. People say, "This is what you've got to do." And I say, "Yes, I'll do it. I am going to do it." I'm not going to pretend to do it. I'm going to do it. And it always surprised me when other people, you get taught to do something, you agree you're going to do it that way, and you don't. I mean, one of good examples, when I was doing dentistry, every single filling I did was examination standard. Didn't
What do you
matter
mean
what
by
grade it
that?
was. Well, it was examination standard. I polished it. I fit, I made it look perfect. I
Gotcha.
contoured it. I angled it. I put fissures. Clearly, it was a lot of amalgam we were using at the time.
Oh, I loved it.
Composite.
I loved
Yeah.
loved using amalgam. I loved
Yeah, it
it.
was. I love it. You could carve it and you could
Yeah.
polish it and you could put little fissures in it, and I couldn't not because, and that's where I think I more and more of these little examples I get of that comment from my sister. It was only like last month she said that, and it's just been rattling through my brain, making sense of all of these things that I've done in the past. And that kind of, but it's this absolute, this setting yourself a goal. And, my father opened my eyes to some things, and he has some very interesting points. I don't agree with him on everything, but I then followed what he was saying, and I was impressed with some of the outcomes, and I wanted to see what I could, he had this thing, I want to see what I could do with this theory that he had. So I went and studied orthodontics, and I went to Denmark because, as a general rule, Grant, I'm good with people. I'm really good with people. It's my specialty. The only thing that I'm not autistic with, I'm not like one of those shy people who doesn't want to engage and you can't assess people. I'm quite good at that, usually. And usually if I'm in a social setting, I get on with people, and I've been described as the life and soul of the party sometimes. But I struggle often within an orthodontic community. I wish it wasn't so. I really wish I could have these discussions and just normal engagements. But I decided I would prefer to study orthodontics outside the UK. And I went to Denmark. And I love the Danish side. I love the Danish way of doing things. I don't know if I'd want to live there, but they are very open. And I thought, being outside of your country, it's a really good place to go and study because you're able to expand your mind somehow when you're not in your own home.
Yes.
It's like when you go on holiday, maybe longer than a holiday if you go traveling. And often it's the little things you see. Oh, why do they do that? Why do they do this? I remember this great example in Denmark. There was a little kind of alley where several of the nightclubs were. And I remember this guy driving up in this white, pimped out BMW with dark windscreens and, the works. It was properly pimped. He parked outside one of the nightclubs, opens a door, clearly parks illegally. They're very special about where you park in Denmark. Gets out, clad top to tail in leather, and opens a pack of cigarettes, gets out a cigarette, lights a cigarette, then looks at the packet, looks at the closest bin that's a good 10 meters away, walks all the way to the bin, puts the cigarette packet in the bin, walks all the way back to the club door and goes in. And I'm just thinking, in any other country, he'd have just thrown that on the street.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he's been got, and this is clearly not a Danish guy. This is someone from, I don't know what extraction, some immigrant that's come in. He's clearly, runs or is associated with the nightclub. But he's been affected by Denmark. He's been affected because he wouldn't just throw something on the ground. And it's this real little slice of, you look into someone and understand that has happened. That's the Danish way has affected people.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be the same in the UK. And it's building those little observations that really helps you to understand things if you're open and you are true to your observations. And I traveled a lot around the world when I first qualified. That helped me to understand just people, where they came from, why they think in certain ways and why we do things in certain ways. And almost the same happened when I went to study orthodontics in Denmark. And in all my understanding and the conversations I had there, what really got me was this key thing is the cause. Why are teeth crooked? And what's the greater perspective? To stand back and back and back and back. And I guess in a way that's my hobby on everything. And again, that might be because I'm a little bit on the spectrum, probably quite a lot on the spectrum. And it's always this answer of why. This was the big question. So the phrase of my father's that the whole family remembers the most is, there is a reason for everything. In fact, that's from my grandfather. So it's a phrase that my father always says. This was from my grandfather. There is a reason for everything. And we would, he instigated the most interesting, wide-ranging discussions at every family meal. So a family meal would often just, the incredible crazy, nothing was off the table. And we would argue things to the finitest degree. And so I had an elder brother and a younger sister. And of course, my older brother, because he was just 1 year ahead of me, and he's probably one of the brightest guys I know.
Is he a dentist?
No. So my father was a dentist. I became a dentist. My mother was a physio. My sister became a physio, and my brother ran off to sea. So he joined the Navy, and he joined the Navy as a weapons engineer, which meant those days, even now, you can't have a circuit board on a ship. So you had to have someone on board who could replace a chip on a circuit board and know which one was out. So he went to study this, really complex mechanical engineering and mathematics with God knows what. And very bright bunny, but doesn't, or sometimes struggles to get the horsepower onto the tarmac. As he knows I say that. But having him slightly older than me, I think really pushed me to think, as it would do. And my sister, 5 years younger than me, I could not be here now if it wasn't for my sister. Because I know I struggle to fit in. I struggle to know what to do in life in many respects. I just know it. What seems so intuitive, so natural to most people, I'm just sitting there, I didn't get that memo.
So, well, that leads me on to asking you actually, what do you then think people get wrong about you? So you're saying about being on the spectrum, you question everything. What do you think people get wrong about you? Why do you think people will make comments about you? And you and I have both talked briefly about someone who whispered about you and didn't even know you. What do you think people get wrong about you, and why?
Well, I'm challenging things. And I'm challenging some of the very foundation stones that people make their livelihood out, and they're specialized in and educated in. And people don't like that much. They'll take affront to you when you question their very foundations. And it's a very interesting thing, because the number of people who have said to me, Mike, actually, you're a really nice guy. I could, if I could get everyone to sign down when they've said this. I'd have a book. I'd have a telephone directory of people who say that, because it's too easy to shoot the messenger, not the message.
Well, do you know what? That is a good point. And that, why didn't you just do the job on your own? Why has there been... Now, I can be a right dick on social media and I will shout about it. I don't really care. I'll go to bed at night and I'll be, oh my God, they don't like me. And I get upset. But there's that other part of me is ferociously ambitious, and I have a passion to defend, to acquire. So I've got all these different sub-personalities that are knocking around in my head, and it does cause conflict for me. But for you, why didn't you just treat your patients your way. Why did you want to make, I suppose, and your dad, why did you want to make and it was and I'm not going to use the word circus. Why did you want to have such a frenzy around you, that avalanche? Why didn't you just stay a small stone? Why was there an avalanche
Okay.
created?
Okay, so Grant, that comes down to the fundamentals of the problem. So what you just said, why don't I just treat my patients? And this is the problem, because when you have a genetic concept of the problem, then you treat it. If you believe it's environment, well, I can't just, and this is the problem, because I can't just treat people. It's people have to change themselves, and it's the environment, and we should be looking at, so, one of my big things is prevention, because, treatment is really hard. It's really hard to do. It doesn't make money. It's trying to change kids. Kids don't want to change. Stand up straight and shut the mouth. That's the core of what I'm saying with the orthotropic concept, as well as probably swallow with your lips together. These are core, and build your muscles up. These are core messages. I can't do this as a treatment. It just doesn't work. That's why you really need to unpack what I'm saying and, go long, have a long conversation. And too much in the recent trend of media has been sound bites. And of course, we're just moving, as this is a demonstration today, of the long format. And I think we're going to see the long format taking over. I wouldn't say totally from short format, but it will, because we need detail. You need detail. You can't, it's not a treatment. You can't just treat someone. You can't go there, do it. A lot of times people have said to me, oh, Mike, how long does your treatment last? And I go, well, we have an intensive phase for 2 to 3 years. But then, I tend to find people take about a decade to grow. I don't think you can make them grow much quicker, because it just doesn't happen. And if it's growth guidance and you need to be observing them over that period, there's no shortcut. I don't have a pill to make people grow faster. And if it is growth guidance, you need to be influencing them over as much of their growth period as possible. And still, to be honest, the treatment is not scratching the surface.
So if you had I don't know whether even ideology is the right word. If you have that approach, why did it suddenly need to become an avalanche? How did it become an avalanche? How does Mr.
Well,
Cuban Man know about mewing
okay,
in
so I
Tenerife?
think that there's missing gap here. So there's this me realizing I can't just do this treatment in my office. I realize that we're not making no money. You're not making money. How do you research something? That's one of the crutch things. And you're really struggling to make, working all hours in the day to just literally treat the patients, let alone do anything else. And still, being a dentist, I've taken a massive pay cut to do this orthotropic stuff. And I'm working every hour God sends me. And I'm realizing that I'm just, I walk out into the street and I see people, and particularly worse now, I take my kids to school and I see young people and I see how their faces aren't growing properly. So let's just, again, wind back. I'm saying that we've got lots of problems with this structure. So I observe we've got lots of ENT problems, we get jaw joint problems, we've got sleep apnea, we've got forward head posture, we've got crooked teeth malocclusions, and lots of problems going on here. And I've researched into anthropology and realized that we just didn't have this many problems in the past, historically. And our faces and jaws were really very different shapes. And I'm just trying to piece it together, saying that, look, something that's not the right shape, because we're not the same shape as our ancestors, that's evident. You can just go to any museum anywhere in the world. And I'm saying, look, there's something going on here. Something that's not the right shape doesn't work as well. What can we do about this? Because there's a really big problem going on. A colleague, Sandra Khan, teamed up with some professors in Stanford. I don't even remember the guy, Paul Ehrlich, that wrote the book, The Population Bomb.
Yes.
Yeah,
Do you
you
know
remember?
what?
Okay.
I don't think I've ever said yes to anybody who's said, "Do you remember the book?" or an author, because I don't read. I'm hopeless. But yes, I do know that.
Okay, so Paul, and he's a really nice chap, and he wrote The Population Bomb, and so Sandra Khan had taken some courses in. I love the American university where you don't just study one thing; you take little bits of lots of courses. I think that's a really good concept. And she did some anthropology, so she went. So having come, I taught her, and she learned from my father, and she then said, "Well, this makes real sense." So she approached Paul Ehrlich and said, "Look, can we get some professors, some, Robert Sapolsky and Marcus Fieldman? I mean, these are top level guys in Stanford University on anthropology and genetics." And they went and looked at it. And, you know, what she's saying in this book, that something that's a deep held belief of mine, is that humanity is facing a problem, facing a bit of a disaster, because we've had these big changes. Crooked teeth is a sort of, it's a little bit of icing on the side. It's a little bit of decoration, really, in the whole grand scheme of thing. And we're saying that, yes, it's one of the symptoms of this change, which is referred to as craniofacial dystrophy, just incorrect growth of the craniofacial structure. And they're saying there's a pandemic going on. It's a pandemic of problems. Please just open your eyes and have a look. And I chose my chosen subject, my thing I got behind, and having studied this in Denmark and reflected on this, I said, all right, well, what we should be looking at is the cause. Because what it came in self-evident as I was in Denmark is that, many people don't realize, I don't think you're really aware of it, but within the orthodontic profession, it's clearly and openly admitted that we don't know the cause of the problem. It's been assumed it's genetic. And that's where that's why I find myself opposed to people, because we've built this science, and we've built the guess 50, 60 years ago, there wasn't enough evidence. But a treatment, people could make teeth straight. It wasn't a problem to make teeth straight. And hand on heart, the orthodontic profession, they're really good at making teeth straight. I'm not suggesting that they aren't brilliant at making teeth straight. I'm sitting back saying, well, what you're doing is, it's been assumed that it was genetic. Okay? Back in the day when we didn't have enough evidence, it was assumed it was genetic. And it was almost like the profession started trying to backfill the science, trying to build the science to support the treatment.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't work. The more science is built up, and people say to me, oh, yeah, I talk to dentists, and they go, oh, well, it must be genetic. And I go, are you aware how much science has built up?
Are there any people abroad? Are there any other dentists, orthodontists that totally support the views that you're having, or your journey into the investigations of the reasons, like you're saying? Are there any dentists abroad that would stand by you, who believe in your journey, or are on a similar journey?
Yeah, I
Dentists, not
mean,
necessarily anthropologists.
yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot of orthodontists. I mean, what you can, as a general rule, you can break things up to the conventional orthodontic group, and the conventional orthodontist group will put them over here on one side. Then you've got the non-mainstream orthodontists, and I think, in largely due to my father, the British orthodontists have moved further that way. Mm-hmm. No one would want to admit it. I remember meeting a guy who had been to one of the professors in St Guy's Hospital. And the professor in Guy's Hospital saying, well, we don't take teeth, there's many teeth out now because of John Mew. And he said, oh, have you ever told John? He goes, never tell him. So it's animosity, you know. This guy was clearly aware. He'd got a long, broad perspective of time, and he could see how what my father was saying had reduced the number of extractions greatly, but they weren't going to give him quarter. They weren't going to give him an inch on it, and I can understand because, you know, my father's autistic. You know, you try having an argument with an autistic person when he's absolutely on a line. And of course, he has a very good point. And he's a little bit of a dog with a bone. And he's just pushed. And of course, if he's got a very good point, that the orthodontic community really, really struggle to debate with him. Because he has a good point. You know, I've never had an engagement.
Do you think that you could have got further with the orthodontists, some colleagues, or if you'd tried a different approach? I know a lot of the listeners will be saying, look, you know, you've made some claims about how the orthodontists treat their patients. Now, for me, if I go and make a claim about, say, a marketer, I think, well, they didn't do that very well, or they're doing that all wrong. And I've seen that, and I've probably said it, and I've been a bit outspoken. And they won't engage with me anymore. So do you think that if maybe you would have taken a different approach, you could have had more engagement and had more of a positive experience with people? Because people don't like to be told they're wrong. Whether they're right or wrong, people don't like to be told they're wrong. And do you think you could have taken maybe a different swerve?
A very good example of this is when I was on the board of the committee of the Croydon Orthodontic Study Group when they had an orthodontic study group in Croydon. And I was so very gentle. After 2 years of being on the committee, I suggested maybe we should have some alternative speakers. And just, you know, I couldn't have been nicer, and I couldn't have been, and just the reaction to this suggestion, it was just, you know, everything, you know, you could see the mood of the room changing. Oh, non-mainstream thinkers. And I go, well, maybe it would be a good idea to have someone else just rather than the usual suspects coming in, because, you know, there's big questions. And in theory, Grant, and I'm sure thousands of people say, yes, he could have done it better. I question that.
I would say better, different.
Okay, I understand different.
Placards outside the GDC and with damaging faces. I mean, that's quite.
I wasn't really saying a lot about damaging faces for many years. I totally avoided all of that comment. Yeah. You know, I really went, you know, good decade and a bit, nothing, you know. And if you're aware, in 2009, I started just asking for debate. So I wrote an article in the British Dental Journal, and a guest editorial, where I said, look, we just need a debate. I called it the Black Swan, if anyone wants to research it. Just saying, look, we need to have a general debate. And I was, you know, really softly, nice touch all the way through, because, you know, how can a profession be treating, you know, it was at least a third of the population. I think it's now approaching half the population, particularly the children, openly admit they don't know the cause and not engage in a debate. It doesn't seem to make sense to me. You know, these are the kids. These could easily be your kids. They could be your friends' kids. Well, we just don't, why don't we, you know, I thought the scientific, you know, we're talking via the internet, via these crazy things. When we were kids, none of this existed. You know, remember that James Bond thing where he looks on his phone and it was a video screen, and of all that, you come out the movie and you thought, of all the James Bond gadgets that he's ever had, that one, he goes, of all the James Bond gadgets they've ever had, that one will never work. And now, what have you got? You've got a phone with a screen on it. I mean, wow, craziness.
Well, so you do talk.
How have we achieved this?
No, you know, I get that, and you do
scientific process, just discussion, engagement. Put a hypothesis, check the hypothesis. Is that wrong or not? So all I'm asking for the scientific process. I'm saying we don't need more research. The evidence that it's the environment. It's stacked up. It's stacked so much it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Literally ridiculous. I mean, you could say the vast weight. You could say just basically the whole goddamn lot now says it's the environment. And there's little, if nothing, that says it's genetic. I'm open to debate, as I said, with someone. And, sorry, are we going to be scientific, or are we going to make things up? And what are we going to do?
Well, if you are going to have a debate, why can't you both sides or meet and find a way that satisfies both of you with regard to, when I see both of you or two groups of people, find a scientific way of assessing the way you treat your patients and the success it has. Now, the only way to do that is to be able to assess a patient in the traditional way. I'm not talking about orthodontics tradition. I'm talking the scientific way. So we're talking rheumatoid arthritis. We're talking all the diseases that have been assessed, that have been papers written on it. Why can't I know that people will wonder why you won't assess your treatments in the more traditional manner, whether it's KEFs, whatever it may be. What would you say to those? So what would you say to those people?
Of course, I'm open house. The number of times I've written to every orthodontic establishment in the country twice. I was then on endless conversations with my closest teaching school, which is 20 minutes door to door from where I was, saying, look, what sort of research can we do? How can we do this and how we can do that? And it gets nowhere. I mean, it's very easy for people to say, oh, there's a list of standard reasons that you can't research with us. Well, sorry, this is interesting because no one's told me, no one's actually said to me this. It's almost like there's a slide on the excuses of how terrible the Mews are that I'm not allowed to talk about. Sorry, I'm open house. Come down, have a look. I've taken meticulous records of these things. The one thing I do disagree with. I mean, this is my father saying this. With the KEF issue, because now
that's the big issue, isn't it? The KEF is the big issue.
But remember, I'm not allowed to take KEFs more than the start KEF unless I have research funding or research, ethical approval. So until I've got ethical approval, I can't do that. So, and also, I don't actually think they're going to show you much. I was taking 3D facial scans. We were taking, really top photographs from like 5.3 meters, telephoto lens, everything calibrated, everything registered, everything we could, bar taking regular care. You're not allowed to do it. Okay? So there's damned if you do, damned if you don't. And I'd love to have a good argument with someone to say, KEFs, I think you're slightly barking up the wrong tree. These points aren't stable. But worse than being not stable, they move in proportion to the other things that you're trying to measure. And I'm not alone in saying this. A lot of people are saying this. A lot of people are saying KEFs aren't going to give you the answer. Now, again, damned if I do, damned if I don't. But more than that, or separate to that, for 30, or maybe now 30, nearly 40 years, my father's just saying, look, okay, why don't we just, all the different orthodontists around the country, doing all of the different techniques, simply say, take the next 10 patients that walk in the door, take them as a sequential group, yeah? Consecutive consensual group. We put them in a box and we just follow them, and everyone gets to look at clearly we're not going to put this stuff on the internet. Clearly you're going to need to also make sure that patient's consented, so they're consented and they're the next consecutive patient who wants to be consented. And we've been saying this for nearly 40 years. But we also, and this is a sticking point whenever we approach orthodontists, they want to look at just the teeth. And we're saying, well, I'm not trying to make teeth straight. They don't stay straight. I try and get the patient to make their own teeth straight. Now, I'm not going to get such a perfect result, but it will probably stay straighter. And of course, if I can gain improvement in the facial development, is that not better? I don't know. In fact, I'll stand back and I'll say, who knows if that's better? I think it is, but I'm giving patients a choice. So they can choose whether the main focus should be the face, or they can choose whether the main focus should be the teeth. Okay? But in a way, we're measuring different things. And also, again, I'm saying it again and again and again, it's not about my treatment. I'm not standing here saying I've got the best treatment in the world. I never said that. My father did. I think that's his mistake. I'm not about my treatment. I've never asked people to come, I've got the wow treatment. I've said, can we have a debate on the cause? All I want to do,
You're
because
obviously very passionate about this.
yeah,
Is there something in your life that you're incredibly proud of?
well, I think I'm proud of the number of people that write to me to say that their sleep apnea has improved, that they're walking straighter, that they're breathing better, that they've maybe improved facial form or other symptoms are reduced. A lot of jaw joint problems got better. You know, it's, and the number of people that have written to me on this, it's just mind blowing. And it's just because what I'm saying makes cognitive sense. If you stop to think, okay, what is he saying? What is his thing? And of course, my big thing here is prevention. Because if there's a significant environmental component to malocclusion, and without question there is, I mean, the hard science is probably saying that there is very little genetic influence. Minor, but little. That's what your Stanford professors are saying. These are the top guys. They're saying it's nearly all environmental. If, even just if there's a significant amount, then maybe we could prevent it. You know, why not? You know, I've got a strong jaw. Now, a strong jaw tends to be a relatively large jaw, okay? So it's got space enough for the teeth, it's got space enough for the tongue, but also it's got space enough for the airway. Now, how do you get a strong jaw? You chew. It's not complex. The next time you saw me, I had a body out here, you'd think, maybe he's been down the gym. It's not complex. It's really simplistic, what I'm saying. Now, why do we get kids? Okay, so kids get them eating with the mouth closed. My functional therapy, the knowledge that teeth and the bone sit in a balance between the lips and the tongue, or the cheeks and lips and the tongue. Tongue on the inside, lips and cheeks on the outside. Okay? Remember Frankel's treatment. Frankel's treatments worked just by changing the action and function of the cheeks and the lips. No more. Okay? You know, he was getting expansion by holding back the lips and cheeks, and that you gain expansion in, you know, gross expansion. Now, if all that's true, then maybe just teaching kids to eat with their mouth closed. Teaching people to stand up straight and shut their mouth. Maybe going so far as to do some chewing gum with kids to build up the muscle strength. And of course, we're swallowing or using our mouth when we're eating. So we've got this great exercise, and this great exercise I call the mealtime exercise, and it is super secret, don't tell everyone. Sit up straight, eat with your mouth shut, elbows off the table, eat with your, chew your food till it's liquid or fully mushed. Food to you, not you down to your food. And then swallow with a chin tuck. Now, I added the swallow with a chin tuck and biting together. But the rest of that is as old as the hills. It's, you know, the least
Mike, I think
secret.
all that is I think all that is great advice. I would advise my children to do that, and it is good advice. But some of the listeners would be concerned that the advice that's attached to this, you know, if say you extracted teeth and you know they may not live quite as long, would you consider that dangerous advice or advice that will certainly put the backs up of a lot of your colleagues?
It's really interesting because I sit there, you know, I'm going to conferences with groups of these alternative orthodontists. And they're saying, whoa, worse things than this. I mean, and this is properly in meetings, and this is all over these guys' websites. And they're saying that if you excessively retract the face, by extractions, reverse headgear, normal headgear, you're going to shorten someone's life, you're going to reduce life quality and reduce intelligence. I mean, these are the common things that's being said. I am very, very measured in saying any of these comments compared to this significant group of dentists, myofunctional therapists, body workers. It's a real interesting group of people that are coming together from all corners of medicine to come and just find answers. Now, first of all, is it true? Well, I would give a very good argument that it was. Okay? I'm not singing from the treetops to say it's true. Then, I would say some really, really good evidence that it's true. That certainly needs debating. Now, you've got one of those odd situations where if you've got a group of people who really think that they've got a point, it's a really important point, and they've got really good evidence of that point, what should they do? Should they keep it really quiet to themselves?
I think that it depends, and I know nothing. Like I said, my speciality is not papers and research, but I definitely think if they do say those type of comments, that they should be put to the mill and put towards the type of research and of traditional medicine if they are in fact criticizing traditional medicine.
Yeah, but I would say that what has actually happened is these groups have been screaming for debate, engagement, scientific, rigorous, discussion for decades. I mean, decades. And this hasn't been forthcoming. So they're getting a little bit frustrated. And many of them feel that it is their ethical duty as registrants and signees of that Hippocratic oath to go directly to the public.
That is a risk. And unfortunately, that's where
you can understand the frustration of these people.
Yeah.
That, it sounds really weird because clearly from your questioning, you're seeing me as one of the people putting those information out there. And yet what you don't realize is I'm in these communities telling people to slow down on this. Yes. And to be a lot more moderate, and let's give them one more chance for debate, please. Yeah. And it's kind of, I'm in this really odd situation, okay? Because you see me as the face of this, what are we going to call this? This alarmism, okay? And so I realized in Denmark, I realized that it all comes down to the debate on the cause. Because if there is any level of environmental influence, then there must be a pathological process. Okay? Well, what? With the concept of craniofacial dystrophy has been put forward. It's been hypothesized. All right, let's work around this. But simply not having any engagement, where's the trust upon which has been placed on our profession if we're not going to engage in the basic, simple scientific process?
I mean, I know that, you've obviously been pushing this forward, and, as it's costed you so far your career.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about...
Cost me everything.
I don't want to talk about actually the GDC in particular, but tell me how stressful
another
that's
day.
been for you.
Wait till the appeal. Okay.
How stressful has it been for you and your family?
It's so. Let me see what it is. So my daughter second daughter number 2 is going to be 9 in May. And the GDC case started when she almost exactly at her first birthday.
Blimey.
Okay? Now, you see these things on suicides in the GDC. And I really, really understand why. I mean,
And how much
having
does it cost
children.
you? What's it cost you in monetary terms, the
It
GDC
was because,
cost?
remember, let's wind back a little bit, because when I decided to go into my father's, get orthotropics going into this clinic, I sold my house. So I invested everything into this clinic and keeping this clinic running for a bit of time. Because again, as I said, it's not a very financially viable concept to do. I'm trying to get research funding. I'm trying to get, the hospitals involved. I'm trying to get everyone interested, because I'm not doing what my father does. I'm not done this alarmist stuff. I'm trying to focus on debate. Okay, so I've invested all this money in the clinic, and then my mother, God rest her soul, when she died, I took her inheritance, threw that in. Then the court case blows up. I go to my indemnity company. I won't name them, not yet. I might come to that because they've not.
Yeah,
Anyway,
best not.
best not at the moment.
Not
They
today.
decided. They looked at the case and they said, look, basically they said, you don't have a leg to stand on. You're going down on this. And I said, well, these experts, well, they're biased. They're showing they're one-sided. And they go, all right, well, it's a really risky strategy to suggest one expert is biased. To suggest two experts are biased, it's not going anywhere. You're going down. So I went and got another barrister, absolutely brilliant. Okay. Now, we'll wait till appeal before I talk about the court case and how well he did or what he did.
But what stresses has it put on you as a family?
Well, first of all, he cost me 600 grand.
So you're 600,000 down.
600,000 down. Then, of course, the business has been wiped out. So, I just closed it. And of course, that must have been, so if you make one of those rule of thumb bases on, what the turnover, etc. So that must have been worth around the £600,000 mark.
And what are you doing now? What do you do now? What's your daily routine?
My daily routine is try to get out of bed. And that's where having kids comes in beautifully, because I wasn't happy, but having kids is what keeps you going, and having family is what keeps you going. And unfortunately, the stress of the court case has affected my marriage. So we're experimenting with my wife living down the road at the moment, and it's hard. It is really, really hard. I mean, I'm good. I'm a survivor. I make light of it. I joke of these things, but it's just.
Would you ask your children to be dentists?
I know my eldest wants to be a doctor, and I've said, yeah, it's fine. I would. In a way, I think it's quite good I have daughters, not a son, because daughters don't have as much ego as sons. This is now 3 generations of my family have followed a path, and it's really good I don't have a son, because they might get that ego thing and want to pursue it. Enough's enough. I'll win. I have one. I mean, for all of the you could all the questions you ask me, all the people go, oh, he's lost his license. He's sorry. The entire population of the English-speaking world between 12 and 22 believe what I'm saying. Their default position. Maybe they don't believe everything I'm saying, but they know of mewing. They know facial form is malleable. It's influenced by the environment. So it's a ticking time. It's a ticking till I've won. Till they're having kids and they're asking the questions and of course this publicity has given me the publicity has given me the reach to push for these answers.
And so tell me, I know that listeners would love to know how you managed to get that reach. And I know the story, but how did you manage to get that little ball into an avalanche of mewing?
For starters, someone gave me advice that if you wanted to get patients, we were struggling to get patients. Okay, because remember, I'm not doing the same thing. I'm not straightening teeth, and don't judge me on straightening teeth, because, and I'm sorry, I'm going to make a little anecdote here, because it just came to my mind. The classic anecdote is a dentist that sees a patient that I've been treating, sees I've been treating them for 8-10 years, looks in the mouth, and he goes, God, dear me, look, there's still some rotations, there's some gaps, this guy must be a fool. How come he's been treating this patient for 8, 10 years and he still can't fix all those little bits and pieces? And God, on such a beautiful girl as well. Now, what he doesn't realise is as soon as you I could easily put fixed appliance on and tidy that all up. My worry is often that could cause negative effects I don't like, okay, on the overall growth and development. And of course, he forgets that girl looked like the backside of a bus when she started. Now she's got great facial form, a huge airway, stands up straight because that's what we've been training them. The next patient walks in with absolutely beautifully straight teeth. Now, and he goes, oh, that's a good orthodontic result. Now, it only stays there because she's wearing retainers. And it does happen, and this is where I'm not pushing it hard, but maybe her facial aesthetics don't look quite as good when she started. But of course, he doesn't remember that. And the one big thing I want to get, and I believe this should be absolutely mandatory, that every dentist takes a quality lateral photograph of a patient every year. Every patient over 4 years old. Every growing patient, sorry, over 4 years old. That would be, why the hell not? If there's a significant environment influence, you need data. So a photograph, you can't take you don't want a camera like this close up. You want a camera at some distance away, so you remove parallax and you get reproducibility. But that could be organized without great difficulty. Why the hell aren't we taking that simple research? Don't believe me or don't believe me. Okay? But no, there's a lot of people that do believe me. And we should just be getting data, gathering data just to see what's happening, because that's what we should be doing in the scientific world. Anyway, I digressed. Where was I?
No, I think that's good advice. Gathering data. I think that's very sensible. I mean,
it's a no-brainer. You don't know where you come from. You don't know where you're going.
What advice would you give to a dentist that's just starting out? Not necessarily about your discipline, your advice. What general advice would you give a newly qualified dentist today?
Okay, the biggest piece of advice is really do quality work. Okay, really, because you've got to think what are you in for? So many dentists I see now seem to have dollar signs written on their eyelids. And the problem is that if you've got dollar signs on your eyelids, you burn yourself out. If every patient comes in and you go, right, how can I help this person? How can I make this person better? You'll be doing this till, you won't want to retire. You're doing quality work, really making people better, investing the time and effort, and, don't run for the money. When I came back from Denmark, I went to Aarhus in Denmark, which is considered one of the top 5 orthodontic universities in the world. And for growth and development, it's probably the best. I'm good with people. I'm really, really, not in this weird orthodontic world where everyone goes tss whenever they see me. But out in the real world, I can nail it properly. I'm good at that. Just come out from me one night, And I could have gone in to Harley Street. I could have done the orthodontics I was trained to do absolutely exactly as I was trained to do it. And I could have made a fortune. I could have been on 250, 500 a year if I'm clever. And I got people working for me, and I've got the gift of the gab. That wouldn't have been totally unrealistic. And I could have done that through my 30s, 40s, 50s, and think what I could have banked, where I would be now. And as it is, I've worked unbelievably hard. I moved so that I was a 5-minute commute from the work, so that I could have kids and, try to get this orthotropic concept going. And I've lost everything. I've nothing to my name,
But you
now.
Still haven't stopped. You could have lost your marriage, your stress, your money, but you still are digging your heels in.
Well, I want the truth. I just want the truth. Prove me wrong. I'm not saying, I'm not saying orthotropics is I'm not saying bio-block orthotropics is the answer. Orthotropics means straight growth. Clearly that is the answer. If your growth is going wrong, correct growth is the answer to wrong growth. That's just, you can't argue that any way around that. What you can argue is the method to do it. And yeah, maybe orthotropics isn't, or bioblock orthotropics isn't the way forwards. Let's come up with a better idea, because that's what you do when you have science. That's how we're talking on this medium. That's how I've got, these clever little devices, because we've followed the scientific process. And it seems that we've followed the scientific process in so many places, but we haven't done that very well in orthodontics.
And so have you always held this belief then? Has there been a belief that you had that you've gone throughout your career that has changed? Have you softened? Have you thought maybe I could be not?
What I realise is it's much harder for people to change.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just so easy, because what we did in bioblock orthotropics, we had this sort of bipartite arrangement. We would do some things, the patients would do some things. And we were good at doing these things. They weren't very good. And often they just lied, just didn't do it. Just plain didn't do it. And the number of people who go to me, oh, but I'm wearing the brace. And I go, yeah, but you're not wearing it half as much as I want you to. And you're not doing the chewing exercises, you're not doing the swallowing exercises, and every time you walk in like this. And so how am I ever going to get a result? And of course, when you're facing that, how are you going to get the results to demonstrate the system and build on it? And, had I not had the court case hanging over me, had I got some scientific investment, some help with the science, maybe I could have pushed the system further. But there are a lot of whats, ifs and buts at the moment.
Do you regret anything? Anything? Whether dentistry or, anything. Do you regret anything in your life? Do you look back and wish
I had a huge amount I regret, but actually,
I was asked.
Honest,
funny,
actually,
I was asked that this morning. I was asked that by Drew. I was interviewed this morning by Drew. He said, "I'm going to interview now, Grant." I thought, "Oh God!" So he asked me that question, or something that I look back and think, So that it's always an interesting question whether someone actually regrets something.
Actually, there's not much I regret. I think that. Maybe I'm over optimistic. I mean, I can't win. I mean, for everyone, in the orthodontic or the dental world watching, I will win. You can't not. I mean, either I'm bark raving mad, either everything I'm seeing, all of the evidence I'm seeing, I'm mad. My eyes are deceiving me when I read these papers, or I'm right. And I will win because the truth comes out. So
you're planning, which was going to be my last question. What is it? What is lying ahead for Dr. Mew? What's he going to do next? Is he going to back down, or are you going to?
Okay. I don't really know. So I'm gonna now go, and this is the problem I'm now going to pose to our profession, because now that I'm not really beholden to the GDC. I'm not going to go back into clinical work. I mean, I built this practice. I built my dream practice. I bought all this equipment, and I had to sell everything on a fire sale. I mean, you don't know how much that breaks the heart. Losing my registration was a acceptable consequence of what I was doing. It was having to sack my staff. It was not being able to even talk to my patients, many of whom are now. They're denied an alternative such as what I was doing. Literally denied it. Having facing my family, just going completely bankrupt, not having any money anymore.
When is enough?
Those are the really tough things.
But when is enough? When will be enough for you?
When will enough what?
When will you be? I've got to stop. I've got to.
Now I've got to start. Because you think about it, I was going, 95% of my time was taken up with doing a treatment. And 5% of my time was taken up with all of this other stuff on the internet and all the rest of it. And yet, I was bringing in that 5% was bringing in a disproportionate amount of earnings into the clinic. So I reckon if I could start milking or spend all my time on the internet and these areas, I reckon I should be able to make a decent income for myself, but also push for the truth, push for change, push for answers, engagement. I want a full, free and fair debate on the etiology, followed by debates on the pathology. And then I want to see us looking at cures, but in fact, more than cures, I want to look at prevention. And I want to look at prevention strategies. I want to help parents take metrics. As I said, I want dentists taking metrics so that we have an overview research. And I want to start pulling these all in. And again, Grant, either I'm crazy or I'm going to win. And if I'm going to win, I'm going to put the science back together again afterwards. And that might sound, just from this position now, just having lost a GDC case, that might sound the most weird thing for me to say. But I've got to build a science here. And sorry, I mean, I would welcome any orthodontist anywhere in the world to have a good conversation with me. Just go through this. I'm a nice guy. I want answers. I'm sure they want answers. I'm just not happy with the current status quo of what we're doing. We should be looking at prevention. We've got a public health service, and cheap, simple public health messages could make a huge difference. Stand up straight, shut your mouth. This is not a new idea. We all know it's good for you. How can we help people to change? Now, I've got 101 different business ideas based on the back of this. Now I'm going to give it a go. And realistically, the comments you were making, you alluded to me saying things that were controversial, saying things that could be negative or detrimental to dentistry.
Of course, I have to be in the middle. And
Cool.
I know my listeners would want to know that.
I didn't say many. I really held that back. Is it still in my interest now to hold back?
As in, what you think that's going to be your new approach?
Well, I don't know. That's what I'm considering. I want the truth. And if there is an epidemic of change going on in humanity, as literally all the evidence, people say to me, oh, but you've got no evidence. And I go, well, we don't have as much direct evidence because, of course, all of those salaried, full-time researchers paid for by all our taxes aren't available to me. There's this invisible wall that partitions me, There's this some sort of apartheid for ideological apartheid. We don't get to have, we don't get no engagement ever anywhere. Now, I've forgotten where I was going with that, but
No, we're talking about what you were saying, that you hadn't made a lot of derogatory statements. That
I haven't. No. Again, I haven't made derogatory statements. But is it not our ethical duty to start warning people that there's big problems going on? Faces aren't growing well. We're treating the symptoms of that problem. This is what Rolf Frankl said 50 years ago. We're only treating the symptoms of the problem.
Yeah. I think the problem is, in the words, I love watching movies, Tom Cruise, he says, it isn't what I think, it's what I can prove. And I think that is, there's got to be proof, or else some of the information can be dangerous, or it would be presumed
and that's
to be
what dangerous. I was going, okay.
Prove it.
This is what people frequently say to me. They say, you've got no proof. And I go, yes, we lack clinical evidence, but there's lots of reasons behind that. However, every single piece of quality science I have ever seen is secondary evidence to what I'm saying. It all backs it up. Everything. So when we're saying I've got no proof, actually, no, I've got all of it. All of the evidence from every walk of life, from anthropology to archaeology to animal experiments to all the orthodontic research. When you actually stop and read the orthodontic research, as I would explain it, I would go, oh, well, if I take this bit of orthodontics, add it to here. Look at the building I build. Look at the argument I create. It all validates what I'm saying. The lot. As I said, I went to Denmark. I went to the top universities in the world. I engaged with my professor, Birte Melson, at the time the most published female orthodontist on the planet. And literally, she couldn't argue with me. There was no dimension. She didn't argue much because she'd walk off whenever I scored a point. But the evidence is there. That old, oh, you've got no evidence. Well, yeah, I can understand why you're saying that, in what context and for what reasons, but is that really true? Am I allowed to engage with you on that comment? Am I allowed to show you an alternative viewpoint of that comment? Because it's a very easy, where is the argument that invalidates what I'm saying? Where's the argument that invalidates anything I'm saying? Because remember Karl Popper, the guy that came up with, he did the philosophy of science. Interestingly, he lived less than a mile away from where my clinic was in Purley. And he said, you can't prove anything. You can only disprove things. I called that article that I referenced earlier on, The Black Swan, after Karl Popper, because he came out with The Black Swan. And he was, really interesting concept, he said. He said that if we did empirical science, and that's kind of the basis of orthodontics currently, is empirical science. We have done this in the past, so we know this will work in the future. That's empirical science. He says, from empirical science, you would deduce that swans are white. Because, hey, what's the colour's a swan? And the next one, go to America, go to Europe, go to all of Africa, wherever you find swans, they're white. So swans must be white. Unfortunately, if you go to Perth, Australia, swans are black. Plain black.
Didn't know that.
There we go. And so if you hadn't been to Perth, Australia, you could conclude that swans were white. But that was the point he was saying. You can't conclude that. You can only disprove it.
Yeah.
Now, that's what I'm saying. I've got lots of ideas. Disprove them. That's what you're supposed to do. That's how science works. And what I see in my speciality is it's become a little like a religion rather than a science. I remember from the Croydon Orthodontic Study Club, only the right speakers get chosen to come forward. I noticed with the last time I went to one of the British orthodontic conferences, they didn't even have free questions anymore. The questions were allotted and preset. It seems to be manufactured, and anyone don't. I'm not here to upset people. You can understand my frustration. The orthodontic community has squarely destroyed my life. Absolute down the line, no question.
When will enough be enough?
Everything. And I'm just saying, okay, I'm not. I can understand why you did it, guys. I'm threatening your industry. I'm threatening your livelihoods. I don't mean to. My quest for the truth is having side effects. I'm really sorry about that. Genuinely sorry about that. But whenever I pick my kids up from school, I see these other kids whose faces aren't growing well, and I know what type of treatment they're going to need. I know they have a higher chance of getting sleep apnea, and I know that's going to be related to intelligence and life expectancy and life quality. And I know they may have forward head postures, and maybe I'm wrong. But for crying out loud, why don't you people engage with me? See if we can follow a logical, progressive argument to find answers. Because, for F's sake, we're supposed to be doctors.
At which point, Mike, I think that was a very informative talk, and
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it as well,
Sure,
and
thanks
you
God.
I you have nearly lost everything,
Yeah.
and I hope that your quest for whatever truth you're looking for doesn't end with something you can't come back from.
Well,
Um,
I mean, Grant, I mean, last just in January, I had PST sitting at a keyboard. I couldn't do it. Could not sit down at a keyboard. I could walk around the room, and I just practiced walking around the room, getting closer and closer and closer to the keyboard. Um, slowly I might reduce my heart rate when I sit down and open things on the computer. I'm getting there. What are we, winter, March now? So yeah, and I liquidated the business last Wednesday, and my body just went into shutdown at the time. All my joints froze up. I couldn't put my shoes on because I couldn't reach my feet. And for someone who's quite supple, that I didn't. It's been really really tough on me.
but you know
Beyond
what?
what
I
most
love
people
the
can imagine.
fact that you agreed to attend It's an Ugly Truth.
Well,
Maybe you can come again in
Grant,
6 months and tell
thank
me your
thanks
next
to people
stage.
thanks to people like you and others who may care to interview me, we're getting the information out there. And thank you for being impartial, standing for looking at the more controversial areas of orthodontics, considering dentistry, considering to interview me.
Well, do you know what? It has been a pleasure talking to you, and once again, thank you for coming on The Ugly Truth.